Hello and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name's Josh and welcome back to Dragon December Part 2. This is not only the second video in this year's Dragon December, but this is the second annual Dragon December, a celebration of all things draconic in D&D. In these videos, just like my Monster Mondays, I'm going to be using your suggestions for dragons that you'd like to see. I'm going to have my attempt at drawing my own version of them while we talk about the lore, mythology, layering habits, diet, and all this kind of stuff, the ecology of those types of dragons. For those of you who don't know, my patrons over on Patreon are the ones who vote on which ones of your suggestions, your monster or dragon suggestions that you'd like to see me draw down in the comments section of all of these videos. My patrons on Patreon get to vote every single month on which ones of those they'd like, and the Faerie Dragon, today's topic, immediately shot to the very, very top of the voting list for this year's Dragon December topic and held first place the entire way. It was the most voted for creature by a massive margin. So we have Sylvia Forgatch to thank for first suggesting this creature, but that's enough intro from me. Let's get started with today's topic and talk about Faerie Dragons. Faerie Dragons, rather than being spelt fairy, F-A-I, they are F-A-E, as in the Fae, but Faerie Dragons are tiny draconic creatures who are said to be no larger than a house cat, and are generally believed to have first appeared to D&D players through the 1983 Monster Manual number 2 for 1st edition, alongside the Cloud Dragon, Mist Dragon, and the beloved Shadow Dragon, which I managed to cover last year. But I'm actually pretty sure that it's issue number 62 of Dragon Magazine, published 1 year earlier, which seems to show the original stat block for these creatures, however, alongside some of the seldom few pieces of lore available for these cheeky little monsters. The article and responsibility for the original source of the Faerie Dragon rests squarely on the shoulders of Brian Yeager, a man who seems to have less information available on him than his secretive creations. Sadly, the 5th edition Monster Manual offers up very little in terms of the lore and origins of the Faerie Dragon, so hopefully this article will help to explain their behaviour and roots. So I hope you'll indulge me as I read this wonderful segment pretty much verbatim. Quote, "This chaotic offshoot of the pseudo-dragon lives in peaceful, tangled forests in all climes, often with a group of sprites or pixies. Faerie dragons can become invisible at will, are able to attack or employ magic or breath weapons when invisible. They attack as 4 HD monsters, biting for 1 to 2 points of damage. However, the Faerie Dragon is much more likely to use its breath weapon of euphoria gas, and that's an attack they actually still have access to in 5e. A Faerie Dragon's Euphoria Breath, just like all draconic breath weapons, recharge on a 5 or 6 roll of a d6, which the DM gets to roll at the start of every turn. And we're told that the dragon exhales a puff of euphoric gas at one creature within 5 feet of it. The target must then succeed on Wisdom saving throw, or for 1 minute, the target can't take reactions and must roll a d6 at the start of each of its turns to determine its behaviour during the turn. On a 1 to 4, the target takes no action or bonus action and uses all of its movement to move in a totally random direction. And on a 5 to 6, the target doesn't move, and the only thing it can do on its turn is to make a Wisdom saving throw, hopefully ending the effect of this euphoria gas on itself. Brian goes on to write in his article that the creature expels just enough to give the target a good faceful. A victim failing to make his or her saving throw versus breath weapon will wander blissfully about for 3 to 12 rounds, during which time he or she is unable to attack and will have an effective armor class 2 places worse than actual. I'm guessing because if you have a shield, you'd probably lower it at that point. The victim will be able to keep his or her mind on the situation and the surroundings as long as he or she makes a saving throw of intelligence or less on d20 during each round the effect of the gas lasts. As soon as the victim fails an intelligence saving throw, he or she will completely lose interest in the matters at hand, indicating that the gas has had its maximum euphoria effect. He says that, quote, "The Faerie Dragon will never attack directly by any means unless cornered or defending its lair. However, the Faerie Dragon will use its magic at any opportunity to wreak mischief on passers-by." End quote. And that's a trait that is still very much associated with modern Faerie Dragons in 5e. We are told that the only sign of an impending, quote, attack, and I use that term lightly, from a Faerie Dragon is the sound of tiny draconic giggles, as this miniature mayhem inducer is likely hiding nearby, unable to control its excitement about the mischief that will soon ensue. It could have already been following the party, plotting some interesting tricks to play while it shifts out of the visible light spectrum to become entirely invisible, a feature that the Faerie Dragon is so adept at that it can do so as a bonus action whenever it chooses. Mr. Yeager's article goes on to say that, quote, most, and we're given the estimate of 65%, Faerie Dragons will employ magic user spells as per a magic user of the level indicated on the accompanying chart. Some 35% will use druid spells. All of their spells are chosen solely for the mischief potential. Offensive or defensive spells will never be learned unless the particular Faerie Dragon has thought up an exquisite prank using some such spell. All Faerie Dragons will learn water breathing and legend lore at the first opportunity, though many Faerie Dragon pranks are a spur-of-the-moment affair. Some take months of preparation, often to go into a single grand practical joke, end quote. Further to this, he says that Faerie Dragons enjoy swimming and diving. In flight they can hover, and are a maneuverability class A, which is a term lost to the previous editions of D&D, but it means they're very, very good at flying, essentially. They don't have to continuously keep gliding to stay in the air, they can stay in one spot. That they eat fruits, roots, tubers, nuts, honey, and grains, and have been known to go to a great lengths to get a fresh slice of apple pie. All Faerie Dragons can communicate telepathically with one another at a distance of up to 2 miles. They speak their own language, in their alignment tongue, plus the language of sprites, pixies, elves, and the birds and animals in their area. They frequently use forest creatures to help them in their pranks. Now, while dragons aren't strictly reptiles, they are their own class of creature, they are certainly reptilian, but we're said that they're warm-blooded, we're told that, and unlike any other life that exists on land in this kind of form, in our world at least, they are 6-limbed creatures. Insects certainly have that kind of feature in our world, but no mammalian or reptilian creatures do. But despite this, I wanted to take some fairly serious influence from an existing creature, and that is the chameleon. Alongside their ability to completely camouflage themselves and turn invisible, Faerie Dragons are well known for changing their colour as they age. Personally, I like to use this as an ability to reflect their emotional state and have their colour change all the time. But one of the key features of a Faerie Dragon is that over time, or however you choose to play it as a DM, they change their colour, and naturally that made me think of the ultra-famous reptilian creature that changes its colour, the chameleon. So I decided to make a winged chameleon essentially, with some very fun patterns as the inspiration here. As well, there are indeed horned chameleons, and dragons generally tend to be depicted with some level of keratinized horn-like features all over their heads, so it seemed all that extra bit fitting. Faerie Dragons are also always said to be like regular dragons, but with butterfly wings instead of regular kind of bat-like or draconic wings. So I decided to give my chameleon-like dragon a set of butterfly-like wings. I didn't want to give them totally butterfly wings because I feel like that's kind of, I felt like this suited them a little bit more, kind of like butterfly shapes within the webbing of their wings. I thought with the intricate patterns that would feature on these wings, they would look fantastic whenever they shift colour. Now traditionally, Faerie Dragons, when they change colour, also change the abilities that they can produce, and this is all tied to their age. We're told that when a Faerie Dragon is first born, up to its first years of life, after its first 5 years of life, they generally have red scales, which traverses into orange when they become between 6 and 10. When they're 11 years, they'll generally fade into a more yellow colour until the age of 20. The dragon that I end up drawing here has green skin or scales, which means that it's somewhere between the 21 to 30-year-old bracket, which then shifts into blue at the age of 31 until 40. After that time, until the age of 50, they go to an indigo hue, and beyond that, anything older than 50 years generally seems to be violet. As they age, they grow in power, as all dragons tend to. A dragon between the age of 5 and 20, so red through to yellow, is a challenge rating 1 creature. Beyond that, they're a challenge rating 2 creature, and while they have red skin, they know the spells Dancing Light, Mage Hand, and Minor Illusion that they can do once per day. When they turn orange, they learn Colour Spray. When they turn yellow, they also learn Mirror Image. When they grow green, they also learn Suggestion. When they turn blue, they also learn Major Image. When they turn indigo, they may learn Hallucinatory Terrain. And finally, when they turn violet, at the age of 50 or older, they learn the spell Polymorph. Personally, what I like to do is to correlate these colours instead of to age to their emotional state. And I'll say that a fairy dragon knows all of their original spells available to a red fairy dragon. I'll keep them at a challenge rating 1, and then based on their emotions during a conflict, which I tend to have change fairly readily on the fly, they will change colour, and with that they will learn one of those spells in addition. While I've not concretely nailed down what colour I associate with each emotion, there are some really good charts online which categorise various emotions into various different flavours, which I tend to use as a rough guide when I'm using a fairy dragon and its accompanying magic, but that's just how I like to use them. Now, the downside of this sort of chart here, indicating their age and relation to colour, is the realisation that these dragons, unlike the majority of their metallic or chromatic cousins, are comparatively short-lived, although that may simply be because they annoy way too many adventurers to live much past the 50 or 60-year age bracket. One of the things that seemed to come up quite a lot online when I was researching these creatures is that the idea that you can always tell which fairy dragon you're talking to, because their wings, although beautiful and patterned, tend to remain the same colour throughout their whole lives, and this is because of the wording in the documents surrounding fairy dragons and their colour changing abilities, which refer to only their scales changing colour with age. But I find this a tiny bit perplexing, because butterfly wings, the wings said to be those that grow out the back of fairy dragons, are actually covered in scales as well, leading me to believe that they would also shift colour. Butterfly scales not only display the beautiful patterns on their wings, but are also likely to help them regulate their body temperature by trapping heat between the myriad layers of little scale-like growths all over their wings, and are very likely to be a defense mechanism as well to help them untangle themselves from the clutches of predators and sticky saps or spiderwebs when they get caught in them, because they shed them incredibly easily. You may have noticed this if you were a child and tried to pick up a butterfly perhaps, and will have noticed this sort of dust-like residue that comes off of butterfly and moth wings, and those are actually their scales. This sort of glittery dust that coats their wings are literally their scales, and rather like a police officer wearing a Velcro or button-on tie rather than one that's actually tied around their neck, if they get into conflict and someone grabs a hold of this stuff, these scales, that combat tie, just by gentle coercion, they can free themselves from this entrapment. But that's all for today on the Faerie Dragon. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please make sure to leave a little like down below, just so YouTube knows if I'm doing a good job or not. That really does tangibly help the channel, so I really hope you will do that if you enjoyed it. Similarly, if you didn't, you can always leave a thumbs down. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But if you really want to support the channel, maybe favourite this video or share it with the rest of your group, so they can start picking out their Fairy Dragon colours for when everyone immediately goes and rushes off to try and get one of these as a pet from their DM. Now, this was only the second video in Dragon December in the run-up to Christmas, but I'm doing 2 videos a week here on this channel, all throughout the month of December, all related to dragons of one kind or another. 1 video on Monday, 1 video on Friday, every single week. So I hope you'll join me back here on Friday, where I'm talking about the closest related creatures to these creatures, the pseudo-dragon. Hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about the base of these creatures, and I'll get to draw everyone's favourite familiar. So I hope you'll join me for that. But in the meantime, as I say, I do all the research and audio recording and drawing of these videos. So if you like this drawing in particular and you'd like a copy for yourself, or you want to support me in making these videos, want to leave me a tip as a thank you for watching all this stuff, you're very welcome to do so. You can do so by following the link to my Patreon, which you can find down in my description box, where my patrons get access to things like all of the illustrations that I do each month, and those who join during December will have their first payment processed on the 1st of January, which means those who join during December will get a copy of every single drawing of a dragon that I do this month as a little Christmas present during January. So if that sounds appealing to you and you want to help out the channel and help me keep making these videos for you, I hope you will, because I certainly enjoy making them. But yeah, please head over to Patreon if that sounds good to you, and if not, please don't worry, I hope you'll just return for Friday's video as well. We can carry on Dragon December. So until next time, if you hear giggling in the forest, A, that's a really creepy forest and you should probably get out of there, but B, it could be a prankster of a fairy dragon. So just keep an eye out. Wear a face mask in the middle of this terrifying pandemic, and also just in case you get breathed on by some euphoric breath. And until I see you next time, happy monster hunting. Bye.